Viktor Frankl stood naked in the freezing mud of Auschwitz at dawn, his body shivering, his head shaved bare, his life's work gone in an instant. An SS guard had just ripped a manuscript from his coat, the culmination of years of psychiatric research, now tossed onto a pile of stolen belongings, never to be seen again. But as the sun rose over the barracks, something unexpected happened inside Frankl's mind. He realized they could take everything: his clothes, his dignity, his freedom, his family, even the physical pages of his book, but they could not take his inner world. And in that moment, one of the most radical ideas of the 20th century began to form, not in a university lecture hall, but in the heart of hell itself. Before the camps, Frankl was already revolutionizing psychiatry in Vienna. By age 24, he had established suicide prevention centers that dramatically reduced youth deaths in the city. He pioneered a new approach he called logotherapy, the belief that our deepest human drive is not pleasure, as Freud claimed, nor power, as Adler suggested, but the search for meaning. In 1941, he received an immigration visa to America, a guaranteed escape from the gathering storm over Europe. He placed the visa application on his desk, next to a piece of marble his father had brought home from a bombed synagogue. The marble was engraved with a single word from the Ten Commandments: honor your father and mother. Frankl made his choice. He stayed. Within months, he, his wife, his parents, and his brother were deported, first to Theresienstadt, then to Auschwitz.
What most people do not know is that Frankl reconstructed his entire manuscript inside his mind while imprisoned. Each night, lying on a wooden plank shared with 9 other starving men, he would close his eyes and mentally rewrite paragraphs, visualize chapter structures, rehearse future lectures to imaginary audiences. He memorized key insights by associating them with physical sensations. The sting of cold became a mnemonic for resilience. The ache of hunger anchored his theory of human freedom. He later wrote that this mental reconstruction was not an escape from reality, but his primary survival mechanism. Prisoners who lost their sense of future purpose often died within 48 hours, not from disease or starvation, but from what Frankl termed existential collapse. Their bodies simply gave up when their minds could no longer see a reason to continue. Frankl observed a pattern among survivors that defied logic. The strongest physically did not always endure. The youngest did not always outlast the elderly. Instead, those who survived possessed something invisible, an inner orientation toward meaning. A father imagining his daughter's face after liberation, a scientist vowing to complete research on human resilience, a religious man viewing his suffering as participation in a larger divine narrative. Frankl noticed that when prisoners lost this thread, when they could no longer answer why they should live, they often died quickly, even when their physical conditions seemed stable. He documented cases where men fell ill and died precisely on dates they had privately hoped for freedom that never came. The body followed the mind's verdict. Here is a fact rarely shared. Frankl practiced secret psychotherapy inside the camps. During forced labor marches, he would walk beside broken men, whispering questions that reignited their humanity. What work did you love before this place? Who is waiting for you beyond these fences? What story must you still tell the world? He once spent an entire freezing night holding the hand of a teenage boy dying of dysentery. The boy spoke of his mother's hands kneading bread dough in their kitchen in Prague. Frankl later reflected that in those final hours, the boy was no longer prisoner number 11379. He was a son again. And that restoration of identity, however brief, became a form of resistance against the camp's machinery of dehumanization. Even beauty persisted in Auschwitz if you knew where to look. Frankl described standing in roll call at sunrise, his body half frozen, when the first light hit the snow-covered rooftops, transforming the gray horror into something momentarily golden. For 30 seconds, he forgot the hunger, the fear, the constant threat of death. He saw only light. He later wrote that these micro moments of beauty were not distractions from suffering, but antidotes to despair. A shared crust of bread passed silently between prisoners. A remembered line of poetry whispered in the dark. The simple act of washing one's face with dirty snow just to feel human again. Meaning hid in these fragments, and those who could spot it gained an invisible armor.
When American soldiers liberated Frankl's camp in April 1945, he weighed less than 80 pounds. His wife, Tilly, his parents, his brother, all murdered in the gas chambers, his entire world erased. Yet 9 days after liberation, he sat at a typewriter in Vienna and wrote Man's Search for Meaning in a single 9-day burst. He did not write it as memoir or revenge or even history. He wrote it as medicine. The book contained a message that would quietly reshape psychology for generations. Suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. Not everything happens for a reason, not stay positive, but this: you cannot control what happens to you, but you always retain the power to choose your response to it. Frankl lived to 92. He remarried, had a daughter, continued treating patients into his 80s. When interviewers asked how he avoided bitterness, he would pause, then say, "When we cannot change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." He never called himself a hero. He called himself a witness. His legacy was not about surviving the camps, but about what he discovered there: the last human freedom, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances.
Today, neuroscientists confirm what Frankl intuited in the camps. The brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of meaning-making, remains active even under extreme duress. People who can frame adversity as purposeful show lower cortisol levels, stronger immune response, greater resilience. Frankl was not offering philosophy alone. He was describing a biological reality. Meaning is not a luxury, it is a survival mechanism wired into our nervous system. So here is the uncomfortable truth his life reveals. We chase happiness as if it is the destination, but Frankl proved through ice and starvation and unimaginable loss that meaning precedes happiness. You do not find purpose by feeling good first. You feel alive because you carry purpose. Your struggles are not obstacles to a meaningful life. They may be the very material from which meaning is forged.
Frankl did not survive Auschwitz because he was lucky. He survived because he refused to let horror define his inner world. And that same choice exists for you right now, in your own challenges, however different their scale.
When everything is taken, the last freedom remains. The freedom to decide what your suffering will mean. Not why it happened, not how to erase it, but what it will become in the story you tell yourself about who you are. This is not toxic positivity. This is not denying pain. This is the quiet rebellion Frankl practiced in the mud of Auschwitz. The decision that no external force, no circumstance, no loss can strip you of your final human dignity. The power to choose your why. And in that choice lies everything.